Okay, so I want to talk with you just a little bit as this bonus video that I'm going to give to you guys. I'm going to talk with you about creating a pizza sauce for your pizza. That's really simple. It's very traditional. You can obviously buy one that's in a jar, and a lot of the ones in the jars, they work well as for your pizza. But if you wanted to make one and you wanted something super simple to come up with, this one's really easy and always tastes really great. To start off with, you'll need a can, and typically they're only gonna be in about this size as the smallest, but try and get the smallest can San Marzano tomatoes. This brand is a pretty good brand. There's several other brands. Typically ones that say they're a product of Italy or DOP on them are gonna be a good brand for you to use. Second thing you'll need is just some fresh basil or basil, however you want to say it. Third thing you'll need is some olive oil. Try and get a decent brand of olive oil, but if you have olive oil already, that'll work just fine. And then the last thing you'll need is sea salt. So to start out with this, it's really simple to do. We're first gonna open up our can of tomatoes. You're gonna notice that it's kind of saucy in here. You don't want to pour the whole can in. There's actually a lot of water that's been in these cans because basically this is stewed, then they put it in the can and they seal it. So you want to get a lot of this excess water out of the can, but there's going to be whole tomatoes in this can. What I'm going to do really quickly is I'm just going to pour out the water and then we'll transfer it to the bowl here, and then you'll kind of see where you'll have the whole big tomatoes. So give me just a second here and I'll do that. Okay, and as you can see here, you'll see that there's whole tomatoes in there. Now I'm just gonna dump out all of these tomatoes into my bowl. And what we're gonna do here is simply we're gonna go back and we're gonna hand crush these tomatoes. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna simply hand crush these tomatoes, and then we're gonna add the other ingredients. It's gonna be super simple. That's what you want. You want a little bit of the water, but not a lot, because otherwise when you transfer that to your pizza is gonna get really soggy, and then you're not gonna enjoy that as much. If you're wanting a crust that's gonna be deeper, then this is what you do. So first of all, we're just gonna simply crush them by hand, which is just squeezing the tomato. I personally like a little bit bigger or thicker chunks. Kind of adds a little bit of texture to the pizza and makes it a little bit nicer, more pleasing to look at. But also it helps you get that taste of the tomato as you're doing it. So we're just gonna crush all of these tomatoes. Be a little bit careful when you're doing this because it's gonna go everywhere. So if you notice, you see how it can kind of get away from you fast. Try and crush it towards the bowl, that way it doesn't squirt out of your hands and all over your kitchen. And so once you've done that, and so you see here now you've got some nice chunks, but try and get everything a little bit separated. That way, you know, you don't just have this big glob on your pizza. You can separate everything up a little bit with your hands. But the goal is you want to get kind of a little bit chunky consistency. Obviously, you can do this to your own liking. This is just my preference. You know, if you decide that you want it smaller, you could obviously blend it up. You can crush it even further with your hands. This just adds a texture that I personally like. But once again, this is your pizza, not my pizza. I'm only giving you these tips as something to help you out. Once you're done with that part, you should be able to go ahead and see that you got a lot of nice chunks here, you know, but they're pretty separate pieces and not necessarily big globs that you're gonna be putting on your pizza. So now, with that done, we're simply gonna go wash our hands and we'll move on to the next step. Next, we're just gonna take our basil and very simply, you just kind of take it and the pieces, just make little tiny pieces. What you're doing by ripping is you're actually extracting the flavor that's inside of the basil already. You could chop it as well if that's what you'd prefer to do. I just find this is just kind of easy and kind of creates a more, I guess you could call it, rustic look for it. Now just make sure that you're making small pieces. You don't necessarily want a big chunk of basil in your sauce. Also, depending on how much you might like, maybe you'd like more than this, maybe you'd like less. Once again, that's all personal preference. From there, I'm gonna save the last piece for our pie here, because this is probably enough for our use right here. All right, guys. Also, be careful with the can because you'll obviously cut your finger because it's sharp, like I just did. And just make sure that stop what you're doing and actually go wash your hands and then put a Band-Aid on it. Luckily, I found a kid's Band-Aid, so we're all good to go. The next thing that you're going to want to add is your olive oil. So you just want to kind of add, you know, maybe about 1.5 to 2 tablespoons to this amount. You know, but once again, personal preference. You might like a little bit more, you might like a little bit less, but realistically, a little bit will do you just fine. And then the last thing that you're gonna add is some salt. Tomatoes will take on a lot of salt, but depending on how salty you like your food, you wanna make sure that you're adding this in moderation and kind of going back, testing and tweaking to what's gonna work best for you. Obviously, you don't wanna dump an entire bottle of salt in there, realize that it's very bad tasting to you, and then essentially not wanna use it. Start with a little bit, maybe kind of lightly cover the top, stir it up and check your sauce. And I like to use the spoon to kind of chop it down a little bit more, once again, to kind of get it, that's kind of the consistency that you want for on top of your pizza, which is gonna make it nice. So, once again, taste your sauce, make sure that it tastes good to you. If you feel like it does not have enough salt in there, no problem. That's why you add this in moderation. You can put a little bit more, but just don't go crazy with it at first. Just to add a little bit at a time and then kind of add some more.